Good morning or afternoon, everybody. Welcome and thank you for joining us for today's regional launch of the Child Rights Impact Self-Assessment Tool for Mobile Operators. My name is Karla Corrêa, and I sit under the Children's Rights and Business team in UNICEF Regional Office for East Asia Pacific here in Bangkok. I will be facilitating the session today. We are really excited to share more about the tool and to hear from our fantastic panel. But a quick word of housekeeping before we get started. We will run this launch event for 1 hour. If you'd like to make a comment or chime in, please feel free to use the chat function. I will address as many of them as possible, but if we don't have time to answer to your question, I'll reach out to you afterwards. We will be sharing a recording of this webinar after the event for those who couldn't join us live, so stay tuned for that. Now, let me start by introducing you to our invited panelists. We have with us today Mrs. Karin Hulshof, the Director of UNICEF Regional Office for East Asia and the Pacific. Hi, Karin. Mr. Philip Ling, Head of Sustainability of Digi from Malaysia. Hi, Philip. And Euler, Sustainability Director of GSMA. Hi, Anne. Catherine Yap-Yang, First Vice President and Group Head from Corporate Communications of PLDT and Smart Communications from the Philippines. Good to have you here with us, Kathy. We have Lourdes Montenegro, Lead of the Digital Sector Transformation from the World Benchmarking Alliance. Hi, Lourdes. We have Josie Barron, Child Rights and Business Specialist from UNICEF Headquarters. We have Rachel Harvey, Child Protection Regional Advisor from UNICEF East Asia and Pacific Regional Office. I also want to introduce you to Mr. Andrew Mawson, Chief of Child Rights and Business in UNICEF Geneva, who will be doing the closing remarks. So thank you all for joining us today. Without further ado, I invite Mrs. Karin Hulshof for the opening remarks. Karin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Karla. So welcome to this East Asia Pacific regional launch of UNICEF's updated Child Rights Impact Self-Assessment Tool for Mobile Operators, MO-CRIA. Thank you all for joining us today. In today's world, a very much digitally connected world, mobile operators play a crucial part in facilitating children's access to a myriad of opportunities and to have their voices heard. The digital environment provides children with unparalleled opportunities to connect, to get and share information, and to access entertainment. We can just take a look at the role that internet connectivity is playing in supporting children's continuing education even during the pandemic. At the same time, there are multiple risks to children's rights online, spanning from risk to children's personal data, to online harms such as grooming and cyberbullying, just to name a few. As a 14-year-old boy in Phnom Penh put it, ultimately, he said, internet is good and bad. It depends on what you use it for. A study in 2019 in East Asia also showed that 7 out of 10 children said they had experienced something online that had upset them over the past year. 2 out of 5 noted that they had bad experiences that they would not want to share or talk about to anyone. And we know that numbers count. Worldwide, 1 in 3 internet users is a child, a person under the age of 18. And more than 175,000 children go online for the first time every single day. In East Asia and the Pacific region, specifically, children are among the most active and influential users of new technologies. It is in this context that I'm so pleased that we are launching the new edition of the MO-CRIA tool today. The digital environment is undoubtedly a space where mobile operators can make a big difference to children's rights. They can fight the dissemination of child sexual abuse materials, for example, or promote internet safety information to children and parents. However, the responsibility of mobile operators to respect children's rights is not limited only to the online space. They have a responsibility to respect rights throughout all aspects of their operations. Child rights impacts can also be found in how companies manage their facilities, their assets, their employment policies and benefits, how they market and deliver their product and services directly or through business partners and suppliers. That can also impact children's rights. Much has changed in the 5 years since the original MO-CRIA self-assessment tool was developed. The digital sector, including mobile operators, that sector has also evolved. And so has the practice of human rights and child rights also. More is expected from companies by consumers, governments, and others. UNICEF would like to thank all the companies, including some in East Asia Pacific, who have shared their experiences in using the tool. We also thank other stakeholders who have contributed their time and expertise to make this edition, this version of the tool, as practical and comprehensive as possible. I'm truly excited to see all of you today connected online for this important launch. Some of you I've met before, I think a couple of months ago also. And we know that the task upon us all is very urgent and requires us to work closely together. With this new tool, mobile operators can start a journey of action to create safer environments for children. Let today be a start where we collectively create a safe environment for children, online and offline, and where they can exercise their rights and have their voices heard. And you can play your part. Thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to working together with you today, tomorrow, and in the future. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for your remarks, Karin. Now, let's spend a few moments going over the tool itself. For this, I have the pleasure to invite my colleague, Josie Barron. Josie is the UNICEF Child Rights and Business Specialist in headquarters, who has been working on the digital sector and leading on the development of the updated MO-CRIA. Over to you, Josie.
Thank you so much for that intro, Karla. I would just like to spend a few short minutes going over what the MO-CRIA self-assessment tool is and what you can expect from this updated version, and some news about next steps and how you can get involved. Can I confirm that you can see my slide?
Yes.
Great.
Yes. Beautiful boy.
Great. So let's get started. Firstly, just a few words on why MO-CRIA and why child rights. Firstly, a child is anyone under the age of 18, and this is a very significant stakeholder group. Children make up almost 1/3 of the world's population, and they interact with businesses and mobile operators in many ways as consumers, family members of employees, and in different ways. And we know that children can be disproportionately, severely, and permanently impacted by business activities, operations, and relationships, in the words of John Ruggie, the former UN Special Representative for Business and Human Rights. And this is why it is so critical for companies to make dedicated efforts to understanding and addressing their child rights impacts. But we'll go into a lot more detail on this in the discussion, I'm sure. A few words on some core child rights issues for mobile operators. Mobile operators have impacts across the 3 different arenas highlighted by the children's rights and business principles, and a few examples that are relevant in the workplace include family-friendly workplace policies or child labor. In the marketplace, we can think about issues like fighting child sexual abuse materials and online safety and commercial practices. And within the community, we're thinking about the provision of security services or impacts from building and operating mobile infrastructure, to name a few examples. And here I just want to highlight that the MO-CRIA tool considers both preventing and acting on negative impacts, but also the positive ways that mobile operators can actively support children's rights. So it takes that dual lens. What is the MO-CRIA self-assessment tool? As we've mentioned just briefly, this is the 2nd edition. So the 1st edition was published back in 2016 in collaboration with Millicom and DNV, and this has been a process of updating the tool over the last several months. What is it? It is a self-assessment tool for mobile operators to understand their impacts on children and how well these are currently managed, and highlighting some areas for action and improvement. Practically, it consists of an assessor guide, which you can see on screen, and an Excel-based tool, which we'll have a preview of in a moment. So why did we update it, and what is the new version? There is a much greater focus on impacts in the digital environment. There's a new section dedicated to these topics, and there's been a general consolidation, simplification, and update of the guidance. For example, we have also a child online safety assessment tool, which used to be a separate tool, and it's now incorporated all the relevant elements for mobile operators into this one document. And in recognition of how much the world has changed over these last years, we've tried to streamline and simplify the guidance as well, with feedback and experiences from companies who've shared how it was to implement the original version. And how the methodology, we've very much improved and enhanced the guidance on how to implement it practically, either by companies themselves or an independent assessor, and also added some more depth around MO-CRIA as a self-assessment and accompanying it with external stakeholder consultation and engagement and external communications as part of a really robust child rights impact assessment. So some steps in the MO-CRIA self-assessment process. This is a section that has very much been developed and enhanced. There is a lot more detail about each of these steps in the guide, and I invite you to have a look via the link in the chat for more information about each of these steps, but these have really been developed and spelled out. This is what it looks like in the Excel version. You can see there are 7 sections. This is a preview of one of them, and it takes you through baseline expectations and further actions on a number of different topics. This Excel is accompanied with a guide that gives a lot more guidance and information to help interpret the indicators, be able to explain them to colleagues, and really understand what it's all about. Another way to use the guide is to help in the process of interpreting and coming up with actions. So for example, there might be a further action that can provide inspiration through that guidance about where to go next and where action can be developed. The tool also automatically generates some visual outputs to help create a sense of where there are some strengths and weaknesses and where to prioritize actions, also in consultation with experts and other stakeholders to help prioritize actions. So I hope that was a useful brief overview of what the MO-CRIA self-assessment tool is. We invite all operators who are interested in taking this to action to join us for a series of sessions between September and November of this year. We'll be working with GSMA to create these action-oriented workshops where you learn all you need to know to successfully manage the MO-CRIA process, hear tips from people who have implemented it, and ask your questions. So we really encourage you to reach out and hear more information. Definitely stay tuned for more details about that. And with that, I will hand it back to you, Karla. Thank you to everyone who took part and who contributed to this process. It was really much enhanced by all the input that we got. So thank you again.
Thank you very much, Josie. This was a very insightful presentation around how we can learn more about the tool and the potential for companies to take into the journey. So with no further delays, let's go straight to our panelists. I have the pleasure to invite Euler to join us. Anne is currently the Sustainability Director of at the GSMA. The GSMA represents the interest of the mobile operators worldwide, uniting more than 750 operators and almost 400 companies in the broader mobile ecosystem. Anne works with GSMA member companies to drive responsible business models and practices. So Anne, I would start with a question for you. Can you describe GSMA's recent work relating to business and human rights? How child rights feature within this, and what do you see as the value of MO-CRIA to GSMA members? Over to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for having me. So yeah, as you've just said in the introduction, in my role at the GSMA, I work with our members to kind of help them to be more responsible when it comes to their business practices. And in the past year, we've had very much an extensive focus around business and human rights. So we've published an introduction to human rights for the mobile sector, as well as more detailed human rights guidance for the industry. And the introduction was very much aimed at our members who are just starting out and are trying to understand their responsibilities about human rights. So we cover major international frameworks and why business should think about human rights in the first place. And the human rights guidance, the more detailed documents, covers the salient issues for the industry in more detail. And I think that's initially kind of wider human rights issues, but if I just mention a few of them, kind of privacy, freedom of expression, forced labor, modern slavery, other labor standards, but also child rights and safety online, child labor, conflict minerals. If you think back to some of the slides that Josie showed earlier and where children are affected, I think it's very clear that, you know, even if it doesn't have the word child in it, a lot of these salient human rights issues for the sector are, of course, also touching on children in some way or form. We also followed this by a quite detailed webinar series covering a number of these topics, which were driven by very much member interest. And we focused on modern slavery, forced labor and human trafficking, as well as children rights and safety online. So, you know, very, very clear that there is very much an interest from our members to get their head around all of this and in more detail. How does all of that relate to MO-CRIA? I mean, it was said earlier, I mean, mobile operators affect children through the way they manage a lot of their business, and that's way beyond kind of some of the maybe more obvious things that you think about. And I think that is where MO-CRIA is really great, because it helps you to get your head around some of the issues that you think about in the first place when you think about your business and children, but also maybe some of the things that you don't think about so much straight away. But of course there is online, which I think is really great to see that is taking more of a center stage, because I think the world has changed a lot, and especially during the past year in terms of the opportunities and risks when it comes to children online, but also wider issues all around the distribution chain and the supply chain. And I think the other thing to think about when it comes to MO-CRIA, I think it's really great to not forget it's one of the few sector-specific guidance that there is. So I think there is a real opportunity for the sector to show some leadership and look at some of these issues. And I think it's also a really flexible tool, which can be really useful. You can use it at group level, you can use it within your, you know, more detailed operations, and you can also just look at a specific section if there is a specific area that, you know, it's really important that you want to get your head around in a little bit more detail. Then it can be really great to use that as well. And yeah, so that's where I think it can be really useful, but it can be also really useful to find out a little bit more on how you can get your head around it. So Josie mentioned it earlier, we will be organizing a number of workshops together with UNICEF later in the autumn, where we are hoping to help mobile operators specifically to kind of start using the tool. And it would be great to see lots of you there. So thank you very much. Karla, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you so much, Anne. Thank you for helping us advocate and disseminate the message about like the potential of this tool for the industry. And now, as we go with an industry perspective, I would like to invite Karin Yap-Yang to join us. Karin is a multi-awarded, an international financial journalist who joined PLDT as Group Head of Corporate Communications on July 31st, 2020. She served most recently as anchor and managing editor of ABS-CBN News Channel, and has been appointed communication strategist and advisor of PLDT's top management team. She oversees the communications needs of the broader MVP group of companies of which PLDT is part. She takes on the rank of the first vice president and is part of PLDT's senior management team from the Philippines. Kathy, we have a question for you. So I'll invite you to join us to tell us about how PLDT and Smart Communications is currently acting on child's rights issues, and how do child's rights connect to your wider business and human rights agenda? Over to you.
Hey, Karla, good to see you. Good to see you all. Mabuhay, all the way from Manila. Thank you so much for the invitation and UNICEF's launch of the updated MO-CRIA, the updated Child Rights Impact Self-Assessment Tool for mobile operators. To Karin, Josie, and Anne, it's just great to hear how your initiatives and child rights are shaping up, and how we at PLDT and SMART can be part of the conversation going forward. Much can be said about the foresight of the late former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan in his opening statement, in his foreword, in the State of the Children report back in 2000, where he wrote, "There is no trust more sacred than the one the world holds with children. No duty more important than ensuring their rights are respected, their welfare protected, their lives free from fear and wants, and that they grow up in peace." None the truer than it is today. With the ills of this long drawn out COVID-19 pandemic driving the misguided to exploit their young online, as demands for digital connectivity rise to unprecedented levels in this lockdown, so has our resolve strengthened to keep the bad actors away from our most treasured lot, our children. We consider UNICEF's launch of the updated MO-CRIA very timely. UNICEF and PLDT Group have recently renewed the Memorandum of Understanding on strengthening our integrated alliance for children's rights and protections. We're proud to be the first Philippine corporate entity that has incorporated child rights into our business principles. As the Philippines' largest integrated telco, it is our intention to take our engagement with UNICEF to scale in a project that impacts millions of children in this deeper engagement. It also comes at a time that PLDT's wireless unit, Smart Communications, recently launched our Live Smarter for a Better World campaign, supporting personal revolutions that inspire collective action. Since our initial MOU with UNICEF in January 2018, our work with you helped evolve our children's rights journey from mere compliance focused to becoming a whole of business integrated approach. Our key officers and executives from different business units have undergone training and consultations with UNICEF for the integration and adoption of the children's rights and business principles, or the CRBP framework, into the group's business operations. In July 2018, our chairman, Manuel V. Pangilinan, met up with UNICEF Deputy Representative to the Philippines, Julia Reeves, to reaffirm our commitment to advance children's welfare beyond corporate social responsibility programs and into the conduct of our business operations. The succeeding training and consultations have provided baseline understanding and the relevant framework for the rollout of child rights-based business policies in the context of the workplace, the marketplace, and the community. We have put in the work long before this pandemic, and that purposefully served us well in quelling the unfortunate rise in online sexual abuse and exploitation of children, or OSIAC. As of September 2020, PLDT Cybersecurity Group has shut down at least 3,000 sites as we ramped up efforts to protect our children from sexual predators online. It helped that we have had guidance from UNICEF since on integrating child safeguarding policies into our business. Reinforcing our commitment to scale what we do, we are pleased to share that the Internet Watch Foundation has recently welcomed PLDT as a member. That means gaining access to an extensive database of web pages hosting objectionable materials. We believe our membership to the UK-based IWF helps expand our sources, scaling up our shared goal with UNICEF in keeping our children safe online. With the invitation to pilot the MO-CRIA tool, we had been given a timely opportunity to conduct self-reflection as a company. We had been able to rally on our business units and cross-functional group to come together on child protection and do a scan of our efforts under the 6 pillars of the tool. The MO-CRIA guided us in identifying our impact to children across disciplines, noting the potential risks and also the opportunities to create more value. It gave us valuable insights on the need to take further comprehensive measures for our broad stakeholder segments towards a more focused approach to address the specific needs of our children. Karla.
Thank you very much, Kathy. It's very exciting to see the beginning of a journey of piloting the updated version of MO-CRIA. We're very excited with this project with PLDT. Thank you so much. And now, to continue reflecting on a changing landscape, MO-CRIA 5 years on, I have the pleasure to invite Philip Ling to speak here with us. Philip heads sustainability at Digi Telecommunications and actively leads Digi's Yellow Heart Responsible Business mandate. Philip has been with Digi for 21 years, the last 10 in sustainability, focusing on ESG priorities, internet safety, and digital inclusion, with insights and experience in social innovation, green technology, and integrated reporting. Philip, we would like to start with a question for you as well. Please tell us more about what you've got out of the MO-CRIA process when you implemented it. What words of advice would you give other companies considering taking on this journey? Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Karla. If I could just share our experience in going through the journey with MO-CRIA. Next slide, please. We started this process in April 2017, whereby we adopted this MO-CRIA self-assessment tool for child rights impact. Now, how does it fit in to the ambitions or to a roadmap of a company, right? And that's where I would like to use a few minutes to share today why it makes sense for us to adopt it. Because for Digi, we decided to champion the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, and we picked one in particular to champion, which is SDG 10, reduce inequality. Now, as we look at reducing inequality, we know that children are one of the vulnerable groups when it comes to online. There is an inequality whereby the rights of a child or the views of the child are often neglected in the digital world, right? But it's one thing to champion an SDG, it's another thing to try to unpack it and make it relevant. Now, that's when MO-CRIA came in at a very timely time, because it provides a framework for us to be able to go through the entire organization, to be able to understand what are the impacts of our operations when it comes to children. Next, please. Now, if you look at this, the next slide, what we have done is that we realized that as a digital company, to be able to be sustainable in the future, or what we call future-proofing your business, it's important that you understand that we understand that to sustain the business, we need to be able to meet the expectations of our customers. Now, as more and more young people are coming into the digital world, and as more young parents are being the leaders in the digital world, it becomes very apparent to us that it's important for us to have a responsible business practice that meets the expectations of stakeholders, that we earn the trust of our customers, that we are keeping them safe, that keeping their family safe when they're using us. So, and we know that customers tomorrow will actually choose a brand that conforms to the same ethical values as them. So it makes sense that we look at due diligence in human rights and child rights as we build on our digital services. Next page, please. So here you can see that on the next slide, you can see that this is the areas where Digi and the Telenor Group has decided to champion, and areas that our customers has said that it is important for us to focus on it. And just a quick run through, you will see in 1, 2, 3, inclusion, future skills, online safety. These are preparing the next generation for accelerated digital future. And it is important that when you do this, you look at it from the lens of a child. How do you prepare a child to be future ready for the workforce? How do you provide online safety as you empower and include more people in the digital world? How do you keep them safe? And of course, at the bottom, you can see that we have a human rights focus. And this is where MO-CRIA comes in, where we look at not only the rights of all our customers, being adults and child, but especially children who are in the more vulnerable and marginalized community. Next slide, please. And I just want to end with this one slide. This is a materiality matrix that we did this year with more than 14 groups of stakeholders. And as you can see, there's a few things that came up high in the survey that we did. Business ethics, data privacy. How do you keep customers or children's data private online? Digital inclusion, digital resilience, respecting human rights, respecting the freedom of expressions. Now, these are already expectations of our stakeholders for us to prioritize as we build a business environment. And last slide. So moving on, we are actually very excited to have the updated MO-CRIA, where we look at ongoing areas in our business where it affects children, and how do we move forward to a sense that we protect our customers and our customers trust us. Thank you. Back to you, Karla.
Thank you very much, Philip. You just kicked us off with the digital inclusion. So as one of the important topics that comes with MO-CRIA, now we will explore a little bit more about digital inclusion and the mobile sector. And for this, I have the pleasure to invite Lourdes Montenegro to join us. Lourdes leads the digital sector work of the World Benchmarking Alliance, including strategic oversight over the publication of the Digital Inclusion Benchmark, which ranks and scores 200 of the world's most influential technology companies. She also leads engagement with global stakeholders and WBA's main spokesperson on digital sector topics. Lourdes is an economist from the Philippines, with more than a decade of experience delivering data-driven and policy-oriented projects for industry clients, UN agencies, and governments. She has authored papers on technology policy as well as on environmental economics. Lourdes, we also have a question for you. In light of your benchmarking findings, what role can mobile operators play in supporting children's rights? Where does the industry need to focus its energy? Over to you.
Thanks, Karla. Good day, everyone. Before I go to the question, I'd like to say first, I would like to congratulate UNICEF on the updated MO-CRIA self-assessment tool. So we are very pleased to support our ally UNICEF in this launch. Next slide, please. So as the name suggests, the World Benchmarking Alliance works together with over 200 of our allies, including UNICEF and investors, adding up to more than 7 trillion assets in management to incentivize corporate contribution towards sustainable development goals. So we assess over 2,000 companies across 7 systems, including 200 of the world's largest technology companies. Next slide, please. So in support of that work, we have published since last year the first round of results for the performance of digital companies on digital inclusion across 4 broad areas of measurement. So that includes enhancing access, improving skills, ensuring that technology is trustworthy to remove barriers to use, and innovating openly, ethically, and inclusively. So we believe that children have just as much right to benefit from digital technologies as well as not to be harmed by digital technologies. So efforts by companies to work on digital inclusion broadly benefit children, whether it's efforts on access, on skills and use, and on innovation. However, I'd like to highlight 2 areas of findings that this group will find interesting in terms of the mobile sector's priorities and areas of future focus. So we're seeing from the benchmark 2 areas on school connectivity, which digital technology companies are showing a lot of work on and a lot of contributions on, but an alarming lack of general concern around child online protection. Next slide, please. So you can explore our results on the website, so feel free to do that. The data is free and publicly available, as the World Benchmarking Alliance is supported by governments and philanthropic foundations. Next slide, please. So what have we found? So two things. First, we've seen a lot of good that companies are doing in terms of helping support school connectivity, and broadly that already supports children's rights and their ability to get an education, especially for the digital future. We're seeing, for example, that telecom service companies are also working very hard on this area next to hardware companies. European companies have shown a lot of leadership, but so has Asian companies. What I would like to highlight here as an answer to the question of where the digital sector and the mobile operators can focus on is what we're seeing is actually a lack of an explicit, very explicit, high-level commitment to child online protection. And that's why at the World Benchmarking Alliance, we really welcome and would like to recommend this updated MO-CRIA assessment tool, because now it has enhanced focus on digital services and products. So we're seeing, for example, that overall for the 100 companies that were benchmarked in 2020, only 16 had very explicit high-level commitments in their business codes, in their business policies, in their human rights policies that say that they protect children's welfare online. And the leading sector by far are telecom services. So of these 16 companies, 12 are mobile sector operators, 2 are hardware companies, and only 2 are IT service and software companies. These are your usual platforms in e-commerce. So I would like to highlight that result because it means that while companies may already be doing a lot of things in terms of partnering with other organizations, and doing a lot of activities and initiatives on child online safety, what we need to organize all this and to further strengthen it is at a high level, prioritize it from the board level down to the executive committee, that the company states publicly that they are working actively, that they have a high focus on children's digital welfare. So that's why we're very welcoming of this new MO-CRIA assessment tool. And we hope and we recommend this to all companies in the hopes that by doing this self-assessment, they realize areas where they are missing and to help improve performance overall. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Lourdes. So good to hear. There is still a lot of room for us to work in this area. There is a huge potential there. And well, last but not least, before we start the panel discussion, let's hear more about children and the mobile environment. With trends and findings UNICEF has in the region, I have the pleasure to invite Rachel Harvey, my colleague, to join us. Over to you, Rachel.
Thank you so much, Karla, and really big congratulations to everyone who is involved in the launch of this updated MO-CRIA tool. So understanding how children and young people interact online and how they perceive and respond to risk and protect themselves is really critical if interventions to reduce risk are going to be effective. However, there are limited available studies in this region, and even less is known about online engagement of children and adolescents from specific groups. So in 2019, UNICEF's regional office here in East Asia and Pacific, with the Center for Justice and Crime Prevention, undertook a study to really try to plug these gaps. We focused on research with young people on their use of social media, and we also set out to include the voices and experience of marginalized and vulnerable children, children with disabilities, children in detention, child victims of sexual exploitation, children affected by migration, and street-linked children. These are children who are often excluded from these conversations, although they face heightened risks. So what did we hear from them? There were so many interesting findings from our Lives Online reports, but I had only time to pick out a few. So first of all, regardless of their economic situation, regardless of their vulnerability profile, nearly all participants had access to mobiles or smartphones, including from hand-me-downs or friends' phones, or even accessing their parents' phones without their knowledge. Children also used resourceful means to go online. This included sharing hotspots or logging into school Wi-Fi's despite official restrictions. And social media is widespread. Social media use is widespread and an integral part of their lives. While we are expecting regional differences in the use of apps here, we found that generally young people in East Asia are using what many young people around the world are using, including Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp, YouTube, TikTok, for example. Social media was primarily being used for information seeking, communication, and entertainment. Children were also using social media apps for general education, learning skills, but also sharing their own skills. They used apps for selling things, and gaming was also very popular with children at all economic levels, with apps such as PUBG or Mobile Legends being most widely used. One of the biggest attractions of social media was to meet people beyond their immediate environment, including romantic partners. And mostly, the online world is a positive experience, and demonstrating how mobile operators and social media can open up opportunities for marginalized children. Children with disabilities told us that platforms enabled them to form friendships and relationships with other children like them. And refugee children told us that they're able to maintain contact with families and friends at home. But young people did also share the risks and harms that they had encountered online. About 70% of both boys and girls, regardless of their social strata, reported adverse or upsetting experiences online. Teens in all 4 countries reported having been contacted online by someone they didn't know. However, unlike frontline professionals and caregivers that we interviewed, and our offline understanding of stranger danger, children did not consider the word stranger to be inextricably associated with danger. Most did not consider someone they met online a stranger unless they engaged in so-called creepy behavior. And this is a really important finding for crafting safety messaging for children. And to note also that as a default behavior, it is normal to accept chat and friend requests from strangers, particularly if they perceive the person as being a woman. Both boys and girls also reported that they had been sent sexual messages and images on social media, and approximately 1 in 20 children had sent themselves sexually explicit videos or photos when they didn't want to. They felt under pressure to do so. More than half of the teens in the focus group had met someone offline who they had originally met online. Thankfully, for the most part, amongst those willing to share their experiences, these meetings were benign. And the person who they said they were online was the person they actually met offline. Interestingly, the issue of cyberbullying was mentioned, but it was of a lesser concern for the children that we interviewed. But both children and frontline professionals highlighted incidents of cyberbullying related to racism and sexuality. Although there were differences in how young people categorized or perceived risks from adults we spoke to, and they did recount risk-taking, they also took steps to protect themselves online, having multiple social media accounts, blocking people who they said displayed creepy behavior, using fake names, and not always posting profile pictures. However, in terms of using privacy as a means of mitigating risk, children were more focused on so-called contextualized privacy, keeping things private from parents or romantic partners, for example, rather than data privacy. The response of caregivers and parents and teachers to risk was usually to restrict internet access or confiscate children's phones, rather than engaging in conversations to help them manage risks. But caregivers and teachers also demonstrated their limited understanding of online privacy and online protection, hampering their ability to engage constructively. So overall, this study has provided invaluable insights which we've been using to shape our interventions and programming ever since. Back to you, Karla. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Given the importance of the activities online and the access of children to the internet, that's why there is an increased focus of the updated mobile MO-CRIA tool on the digital environment. So thank you so much for helping us understand a little bit of how children are navigating online and understand the opportunities and risks. Now, I would like to invite all the panelists to join us for a quick discussion. I'll invite everybody to put their cameras on and their mics on. And with this, let's start a discussion. Thank you so much for your insights. And with this, I think it's important also to see there are some resources that we are adding on the chat box. So Josie has managed to include the link to the updated MO-CRIA tool, and Rachel has also shared the report of UNICEF explaining more about these risks. Thank you so much. With no further delay, I'd like to invite Anne, and I'll have a question for you, Anne. How has COVID impacted the importance of child rights as a material issue for the sector? Any findings that are particularly relevant to East Asia and the Pacific region? Over to you.
Thank you very much. During the past year, we've actually done quite a lot of work to see how the COVID-19 pandemic might shape business and sustainability landscapes. And there were quite a few fundamental shifts, which are, of course, also affecting children. We've heard it before that, they have been spending a lot more time online, especially during times of homeschooling. And I think around the world, but also, specifically to the region, just given how diverse it is, homeschooling has been quite a deeply unequal experience for children in terms of the content, the connectivity, the skills and devices, and also the availability of adults to support them. So when learning went online, it became clear that many schools and teachers were unprepared in terms of ICT equipment and digital skills. But mobile operators have also introduced many initiatives to kind of try and tackle these challenges. But I think it's easy to forget the offline environment as well, but given strict restrictions to kind of extracurricular activities and socialization, a lot of social interactions have also moved online. But another real impact has been increasing offline violence. So more widely relating to the rights of children, economic hardship that has followed. We have found that it will disproportionately impact the most vulnerable children and may, I guess, in the longer term, heighten the risks in relation to child labor and trafficking, which are, of course, also really relevant and we have covered and are covered by the tool extensively. So there is a lot going on online and offline, and for the region, I think it is very much, as I said, different experiences in different parts of the region because it is such a diverse and different region. Back to you.
Great, thank you so much. With this, I'm going to invite Kathy for a last question for you, Kathy. What are your reflections on the new MO-CRIA self-assessment tool? Over to you.
Yeah, Karla, the new MO-CRIA is going to continue to be useful to us as we continuously learn to strengthen and broaden the parallel undertakings and advocacies in support of our business goals and our larger sustainability agenda. We're also working closely with you to support the Safer Kids PH program and various initiatives that help address mosaic business engagements, as we know, need first to be proven effective locally before they can be scaled up to aspire for global impact. Now, the Philippines being a focal area for various aspects of the children's rights agenda, one can innately be an incubator for impactful programs that can be replicated in other areas of the world. This is our goal. So as the Philippines' largest integrated telco, our linkages to the global industry partners and the multilateral organizations like UNICEF allow us both to bridge the local perspective with the global best practices, understand what works on the ground, and identify the gaps, the strengths, the opportunities, and see what works best and what we can be scaled up further. Inspired by our partnership, we're really committed to helping our country build a local success story and provide a best example for the world in terms of our shared work for children, particularly in the context of today's rapidly evolving digital landscape. we look forward to continuing our journey together and the integrated alliance with UNICEF to exploring the different areas of collaboration, which in turn, from PLDT Group's perspective, will complement our sustainability pillars. Ultimately, towards a shared value partnership, children are key citizens of the digital world, and we recognize that we are in a unique position to make a noble difference. Keeping in mind Mr. Anand's timeless guidance that there is no trust more sacred than the one the world holds with children. Back to you, Karla.
Thank you so much. Very inspirational, Kathy. And with this, I'd like to invite Philip to share a little bit of more. Where do you see, Philip, new challenges arising, and where does the industry need to prioritize efforts? What is Digi currently doing to act on children's rights issues? Over to you.
Technology is moving at such a rapid pace today. You've got new platforms, you've got new technology, you have big data, machine learning, all sorts, right? And we must always be conscious that children are always the early adopters. They're the first one to get on that app, the first one to try this out, and which is so important. Therefore, the priority for me is to have the conversations, to have the dialogue. When we talk about children safety online, example, we talk about age-appropriate content. How do you decide? Where do you draw the line? Now, these are things that requires a lot of conversations between multi-stakeholders in that technology sector that's providing the content and the service. Now, back on where we are focusing a lot today, we are focusing a lot on capacity building. As much as we want to give more opportunities and capacity building to children, we are also aware of the risk online, and the risks are evolving as we speak, right? So how do you provide content that is relevant to the child, but more importantly, how do you deliver it in a way that's effective? Now, children are consuming media. They are probably no longer reading long text and white papers, right? So in a sense, which is why partnerships is so important at this point, to learn from one another and to see how we can deliver this and making it a priority in the way that we deliver our service, right? So you always heard of things like security by design, privacy by design. Why can't we have child rights by design when we create new services? Thank you, Karla.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And now I'm going to go back to Lourdes with another question. How do you think, Lourdes, a process like MO-CRIA can support mobile operators? Do you have any other reflections on the MO-CRIA tool? Over to you.
Thanks, Karla. From the results that we're seeing from our data for the first round of the digital inclusion benchmark, it's clear that probably the MO-CRIA self-assessment tool has helped a lot the mobile sector in making sure that there's heightened awareness as well as responsibility for child rights broadly and child rights online. So we're seeing that from the results. So the data speaks for itself. The network providers and particularly the mobile industry is leading in this particular work. And so we see as a first step, the MO-CRIA self-assessment tool really as a form of awareness building within the company itself. And it helps build understanding across different business units, where the gaps are, who's responsible for whom. But what we also see, and this is important, is that the MO-CRIA self-assessment tool works best when it works within the context of a broader effort that's coherent towards digital inclusion, broadly defined, which means that digital rights are included, and it's really about thinking about broad-based participation in the digital economy and society and the mitigation of those risks and harms. And children are a very important part and parcel, as Philip has noted. They're often first adopters and yet often forgotten. So definitely the MO-CRIA self-assessment tool is very important there, complemented by broader efforts of the company towards digital inclusion.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And with this, I invite my colleague Rachel Harvey to tell us what were the key recommendations that were coming from the study on children's use of social media. in East Asia that in which mobile network operators should consider when advancing the child online protection agenda in the region. Over to you, Rachel.
Thanks, Karla. So there were 6 main recommendations of the report. The first was that strategies to tackle online risks need to be aligned with broader frameworks that seek to tackle violence against children, recognizing that online abuse doesn't sit in isolation of offline vulnerabilities. In ASEAN, we now have an official regional framework, a declaration on child online protection that was adopted by heads of state in 2019. And we have an implementation framework that's being developed that should be adopted in October, that sits under a wider framework of a regional plan of action in ASEAN to eliminate all forms of violence against children. And I just want to note that one of the key pillars of that regional plan focuses on the role of the ICT industry, including mobile network operators. Second, it's crucial to foster offline skills, offline social and conflict resolution skills and resilience amongst children, so they can also mitigate risks online. Third, it's really important to help parenting, supporting them in a digital age to enable caregivers to provide constructive support for children. Of course, tech companies have a huge role to play to promote the safe use of their platforms, including making profiles private as default and restricting contact options to friends only as default. And fifth, to establish benchmarks and systems to monitor progress on online safety, such as the one that was launched here today. And lastly, the report highlighted that interventions to protect children online must be based on evidence of what works. Another panelist said that. This includes the design of campaigns, messaging and education, a big area of investment not only by UNICEF, but also of many mobile network operators. So consequently, last year we launched an initiative with a regional think tank comprised of ICT actors, including the Telenor Group, academia, UN, NGOs, to enhance our understanding of what works to reduce risky behavior and promote positive behaviors of children online. This has led to the development of an evaluation framework that can be tailored for use by ICT companies, as well as the UN and NGOs, to really assess the impact of online initiatives. So once this is tested, we'll launch the evaluation framework in August as an online public good. So this initiative will really serve to generate evidence to ensure that our collective investment in messaging and education to keep children really safe online is as effective as possible in the future. Thanks, Karla.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Well, thank you everyone for your fantastic insights and perspectives. It's been really a pleasure to be facilitating the session today. As we approach the end of the day, I'd like to invite my colleague Andrew Mawson, the Chief of Children's Rights and Business in UNICEF headquarters, for his closing remarks. Andrew, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Karla, and thank you to everybody who's spoken. As all of you from the world of business recognize, there's a real increasing global expectation within business and also about business from the public, from investors, from governments, about sustainability and social responsibility. And in some parts of the world, this is even leading now towards a legally mandatory initiatives around human rights due diligence. And 35% of the world's population are children, and so their rights are integrally part, as Lourdes, I think, has really said, of comprehensive approaches towards sustainability and responsible and purposeful business. So bringing children into this area is common sense. It's part of comprehensive approaches. And is essential basically in taking these agendas forward. If you don't ask the right questions, one doesn't actually ever find out the right answers. If one doesn't investigate impact on children, one will never know what that impact actually is. And of course, that is a very vulnerable place for any business to be in the contemporary world. So I want to emphasize some of the points, or one or two key points that speakers made. And the really key one is that this tool is actually very practical. It's useful. As Catherine and Philip, and indeed Anne has said, it's an integral part of helping business implement sustainability and business responsibility strategies. And mobile operators are among those who are in the lead. And yet we've also heard that there's still a very long way to go, and actually still limited numbers of companies are actually really bringing children into the mix. Now, I'm going to thank everybody who spoke, Karin and Rachel from UNICEF, Lourdes from the World Benchmarking Alliance, Catherine from PLDT Smart, Philip from Digi Telecommunications, Karla for hosting us, Josie Galea Baron, my colleague, for setting this up and for leading on this revised MO-CRIA initiative. All of the companies who've been involved in the development, not just of this new revised version of the tool, the updated tool, but also those who've actually were involved in the beginning several years ago. The company Millicom, I think, has a huge amount of gratitude from us in terms of their pioneering role in some of this. And the companies that have been testing and working on the tool since. Our door remains absolutely open to all of you to come to us, having used the tool or tried to use the tool, pointing out its strengths and its weaknesses, and to continue to discuss with GSMA and with other colleagues. Sorry, I forgot Anne Euler from GSMA. Anne, on my bit of paper, you were off on the right-hand side, which is why I missed you on the list there. I do apologize. So Anne also from GSMA for contributing to the discussion today. And above all, to all of you who attended, thank you very much indeed. Please stay in touch with us. Please try and use this tool. Please feedback. And with that, I'm going to close the session by passing back to Karla. Thank you very much indeed for being with us today. Over.
Thank you all for joining us. Thank you. Bye-bye. Have a good day.